Okay, so when you think of Hyderabad today, what comes to mind? For me, it's that buzz, the tech hub energy, amazing biryani. You can almost taste it. And obviously the Charminar. It's so iconic.
Definitely. It's got this vibrant, modern feel.
But let's hit pause and rewind. Go back, say, before 1948, under the Nizam. Totally different picture.
Oh, completely.
Oh.
It was a place of really stark contrasts.
Mhm.
You had unbelievable wealth sitting right next to, well, extreme poverty.
Exactly. It's this kind of hidden past, something that gets glossed over when we just think about the modern city.
And that's really what we want to dig into today. The sheer contrasts of that period are quite striking. On one hand, yes, grand buildings, amazing institutions, a certain cultural refinement,
Right.
but that was just one side of the coin.
Hmm.
For most people living there, life was something else entirely.
So yeah, our goal here is to really unpack Hyderabad before it joined India, not through rose-tinted glasses, but looking at the complex reality that actually set the stage for the city we see now.
It's about understanding the foundations, isn't it? The social setup, who held the power, what daily life was like back then, specifically in the Nizam's era, before 48.
And we've got some really great historical accounts, some analysis to help us piece it all together. It's like uncovering the blueprints for modern Hyderabad.
Okay, so this idea of Hyderabad as a tale of two cities really resonates. You've got the last Nizam, Osman Ali Khan, kind of presiding over this massive duality.
He definitely oversaw the creation of some incredible stuff. You can't ignore that.
Absolutely. Things like Osmania University, I mean, just look at the Arts College building. It's breathtaking.
Oh, it really is. That blend of styles, Persian, Deccani. It speaks volumes about the ambition, the vision, at least in some quarters.
And it wasn't just the universities. There were other impressive projects. Hospitals, courts, quite sophisticated designs for the time.
And this is the crucial, but all this grandeur was kind of propped up by a very specific system, wasn't it? A feudal system.
Precisely. And that's where the inequality really bites. You had this system where power and wealth were concentrated.
You had a small Muslim ruling class, yeah. And then also Hindu landlords who benefited from that structure.
Right. And that word you hear associated with old Hyderabad tehzeeb, that sort of refined culture, the manners, the poetry.
That sophisticated vibe.
Yeah, exactly. But the sources suggest that it was mostly limited to this elite circle. It wasn't, the everyday experience for everyone.
Not at all. For the majority, the economic reality was pretty grim.
And we need to grasp the scale here. Hyderabad state was huge geographically, bigger than England and Scotland combined.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that big.
Yeah. And by 1941, the population was over 16 million, mostly Hindu, with a significant Muslim minority.
And the economy, you hear it was rich.
It was, on paper, the wealthiest princely state. Yeah. Its GNP, its total economic output, was actually comparable to some European nations back then. Pretty impressive.
That distributed how?
Terribly unevenly. That wealth was massively concentrated. Imagine like a tiny fraction of people holding nearly all the money. That was the reality for most.
Okay, so that sets the scene for what happens next, right? India gets independence in 47, and the Nizam, he has other ideas.
He absolutely did. He didn't want to just merge with India. His ambition was for Hyderabad to be its own independent country.
Think about that for a second. While the rest of the country is unifying, celebrating freedom, he's pushing for a separate nation.
It was a bold stance. He even took his case to the United Nations, made a formal appeal.
Which ultimately didn't work, but it shows his determination, maybe his misreading of the situation.
Perhaps. And alongside the diplomacy, there were, let's say, less diplomatic moves happening. His government was definitely talking to Pakistan, building connections there.
And stockpiling weapons, that's a significant detail.
A very significant one.
Yeah.
Which leads us to the Razakars.
Right. This is where it gets darker. The Razakars and their leader, Qasim Razvi, they weren't just political figures, they were a militant group.
And their impact was huge. They really ramped up the tension. We're talking acts of terror, specifically targeting the Hindu population, trying to whip up religious fervor among Muslims.
Creating fear, instability, just making a volatile situation much, much worse.
Absolutely. And this period, where the Nizam clung to the idea of independence after India was already free, it lasted about 13 months.
13 months of uncertainty, growing violence.
Yeah.
You can see how that couldn't last.
No, it really couldn't. So let's shift focus a bit. What was life actually like for the majority during all this? Away from the palaces and the politics.
Yeah, good question. For most Hindus, the farmers, the laborers, the artisans, life was incredibly tough. That feudal system we mentioned,
Hmm.
it meant jagirdars and zamindars controlled the land, held immense power. People were burdened with heavy taxes. Just surviving, feeding your family was a constant struggle.
And it's wrong to think that just because the Nizam envisioned a Muslim state, that life was automatically good for ordinary Muslims.
No, the benefits were really concentrated at the very top. Your average Muslim trader or craftsman, they faced their own economic hardships.
The system wasn't working for them either, not really.
So that whole idea of tezeb, that cultural richness, it didn't put food on the table, did it? It didn't provide health care or basic infrastructure for the masses.
Exactly. That glittering image just wasn't the lived reality. Access to basics like education, healthcare,
Hmm.
it was severely limited, even with those grand institutions around.
And what about women?
Life was very restrictive. Opportunities outside the home, education, public roles, very minimal, regardless of whether they were Hindu or Muslim.
So you have this internal conflict, the Razakars causing chaos, and the Nizam refusing to join India.
It all comes to a head in 1948. The Indian government felt it had no choice.
Patience ran out. The combination of the independence push and the Razakar violence, it was untenable, and that led to Operation Polo.
The military action by India.
Yeah. And it was over remarkably quickly, wasn't it?
Just 5 days. Hyderabad was integrated, the Nizam signed the Instrument of Accession, and that chapter closed. A massive turning point.
And integration started bringing changes. Slowly, maybe, but significantly. That feudal system began to be dismantled.
Land reforms were introduced, trying to give some power back to the peasants, the people who actually worked the land.
And Hyderabad started on that path towards becoming the democratic, diverse city it is today.
Though, it's important to add, the transition wasn't seamless. There were still challenges, lingering issues. Communal tensions didn't just vanish overnight, and economic inequality is still something the city grapples with.
Which kind of brings us to that nostalgia factor. People sometimes look back at the Nizam's time with a certain romanticism.
It's interesting, isn't it? Maybe it's the physical legacy, the palaces, the architecture. You see these beautiful things and maybe forget the context.
Or focus on the stories of that elite culture. But like we said, that wasn't the whole story, not even close.
It's about balance, right? You can acknowledge Osman Ali Khan's patronage of arts or education.
Sure, Osmania University is a major achievement.
Absolutely. But you also have to acknowledge that he led a system that was fundamentally unequal, that kept millions in poverty.
It's like praising a chef for an amazing dessert when the main course was, well, pretty bad for most people at the table.
That's a good analogy, actually. You appreciate the skill in one area, but you can't ignore the bigger picture.
And then you jump to Hyderabad now. It's almost night and day in some ways. Global tech companies, modern infrastructure. It's plugged into the 21st century.
Completely. You see skyscrapers, the metro, a totally different landscape.
Yet the past is still there. Charminar is still standing proud right in the middle of it all, a physical link.
And that integration, however contested at the time, ultimately brought democracy. It gave a voice to people who simply didn't have one under the old regime.
Still, you look around Hyderabad today and inequality is still visible, isn't it? The gap between the shiny tech zones and some older areas, it's noticeable.
It is. In a way, that divide may be symbolized by the Musi River that runs through the city.
Now.
Because understanding where Hyderabad came from helps us understand where it is now and maybe where it's going. It's not just history for history's sake.
Right. Seeing those stark contrasts in the Nizam's time, the poverty alongside the opulence, the lack of power for most, it really underscores the value of the changes that came later.
It's a lesson about unchecked power, about inequality.
Right.
And it also shows how dramatically a place can transform from feudal state to democratic hub in, historically speaking, a pretty short time.
It's quite a journey.
It really is.
So maybe the takeaway for you listening is this. Next time you think about Hyderabad, the modern city, the biryani, the tech, maybe also spare a thought for the lives lived under the Nizams. Look past the nostalgic sheen.
Yeah, try to grasp the complexity, the struggles, the reality for the majority back then. Understanding that hidden past, the good and the bad, really enriches how you see the Hyderabad of today.